say Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of stuff you cannot do. But these two systems have to talk to each other, and people across these two countries have to be able to talk to each other. So there is a certain minimum amount of freedom that is given to everyone, that is more or less guaranteed by agreements that have been signed by all these countries under the aegis of the ITU. The ITU deals with politics, it deals with technology. The ITU, on the other hand, is like every other bad government body. They are extremely closed. If you want to attend a meeting, please put up $10,000 as upfront money to show that you are serious, which keeps most of us out. Happily for us, the people who run the internet don't actually subscribe to that philosophy. So they have this group called the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IETF. This is primarily driven on mailing lists. This is engineers talking to engineers, researchers talking to researchers, and researchers talking to engineers, of course. People who figure out how the next generation of protocols will work, what stuff will not work, why stuff will not work. Communication on these mailing lists and in IETF meetings is fun, especially if you are technically inclined. If you aren't, it gets fun, but you won't be able to take the heat most probably. People there are blunt. In one IETF meeting, so this engineer from PC, which is a Chinese company, but what for steering system, Kuwait. So that guy shows up and says, we have developed this fancy protocol for voice and video and everything else at the same time, which should work perfectly fine. And somebody asked him, how many users have you tested this with? And he goes like, so our current test base is 5 clients and 1 server. And the response to that is, fine, please go home, come back to me when you have tested with at least 1 million clients. They have been calling him an idiot. Not directly at least, but it's only the work that gets criticized. But that is the sort of level of flavor that you can expect in an IETF meeting. But this is the easy bit, that's only technology. Then comes the hard bits, the politics and the money side of things. There is ICANN, there is the IANA, there is the US government. All of these things get involved once you start getting into the politics and naming. So most of us know sites by name. Computers know them by numbers.
So yeah. How much control do you have?
A lot. I'm about to come to that. So most of us know this sites by name. Computers know them by IP. So for guaranteed mapping for things to work globally, there is a system called the DNS, the Domain Name Service, which is basically named to IP mapping at its simplest. So we want one authoritative source for this. This used to be controlled by an entity called the IANA, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. Then the US Department of Commerce spun off some of the functionality of the IANA into a separate body called the ICANN, Internet or something else, whatever it stands for. ICANN is better known as I can't in tech circles. So the ICANN basically is a US body currently, and they control to a large extent what registries are allowed to and not allowed to do. On the other hand, absolute root zone authority still rests with IANA, which is still controlled by the Department of Commerce. So to answer your question, if the IANA wants to take it off, if the US Department of Commerce wants to take off the naming system, it can take it off. It can turn down DNS. It really can't turn down the internet. Now again, every computer on the internet is a peer. This was one of the requirements of the original experimental design, that this core of the network needs to be dumb. Everything in the middle has to be as dumb as possible. All intelligence has to be in the edge. The machines connected to it. So what you have is intelligent computers and dumb routers and dumb switches, ideally. And every one of these computers is a peer. There is no distinction between your home PC and my home PC and some web server out there on the internet. So Google on the internet is exactly as equal to me as to my PC. It doesn't matter who's a web server. So if you're basically speaking of some protocols like mail, they're peers. If you're speaking of a protocol like HTTP, there is a client-server model where the server has all the control and the client can only ask for stuff. So with IPv4, one of the problems that we keep hearing is that we are going to run out of IP addresses. Turns out that that's not quite the case. The particular problem is that we are running out of IPv4 unassigned. We are running out of IPv4 unassigned space. 18 the local then okay. So IP assignment authority basically goes IANA. Then IP each region. There are 5 regions in the world to which this is assigned. There is ARIN for the North Americas, LACNIC for South America, RIPE for Europe, APNIC for Asia Pacific, and AFRINIC for Africa. Every one of these, so all these 5 bodies basically control who gets what IP addresses. They give it to you in a bunch of blocks, and then your ISPs give down to their customers, and if a smaller ISPs give you 1 or 2 addresses, or they give you some sort of private IP, in your worst case scenario, which you really don't know. So the problem is that what you are going to get is that we are running out of IPv4 addresses. The technical solution to this exists. This was solved in about 1995. It's a solved problem for 15-16 years. But now at this point we are running into this political problem where no ISP wants to move first. Because switching to IPv6 doesn't really give them any benefits. Adding IPv6 on their current stack is fine. So most ISPs in India or abroad, the engineering side is done. What you don't have is consumer equipment which is IPv6 ready. I mean, you can get it, it just costs you like 500, 600 rupees more for your home router. Not too expensive. But nobody's going to buy this. Because hey, on a 2000 rupee router, 600 is a lot.
And you have to buy it.
Exactly. I mean, you're going to spend it now or you're going to spend it a year later. So now you have all these individual ISPs who have problems deciding to upgrade. Then we have another problem that every ISPs within your network, it's fine, right? They lay the connection to your house and it's free. From that point on, it's almost free to run that connection. It's extremely expensive to lay the wire in the first place. But once it's laid, it's dirt cheap. Laying the cable would cost you like say about a lakh, one shot, or 2 lakhs. After that, you're not spending any money for the next 5 years. Few hundred meters, it doesn't matter. Because basically you plug your switch, last mile is 100 meters of copper. The switch itself is about 2.5 lakhs and 48 ports. And then after that you just run fiber, so you can go 20 kilometers point to point, no problem. Point to point itself is easy. It's when you have these last mile connections that you need to go into so many households, that starts to get expensive. After which, once you're, now these ISPs, you don't, I mean, if it's a small ISP, you really want to talk to bigger ISPs, so now they have to buy bandwidth. Now how much bandwidth are they going to buy? They're not going to buy as much as required to serve all their customers from there. It's always done bit by bit by bit. So if an ISP buys 1 Mbps of bandwidth, they'll probably sell it to like 20 customers or 40 customers, telling each of them that you'll get 1 Mbps. That usually works out for most end users and people who basically say, I want to get my email now fast. Until it turns out, oh, and somebody in my house is running BitTorrent. Boom! Everybody's finances go bye-bye. ISPs hate that. So what ISPs do is basically, some people have content, some of them have customers. Then, so what happens is you get to this place called an internet exchange point. Everybody basically puts a wire to the IX. An ideal IX is an L2 switch, layer 2, physical layer 2. All that is pretty dumb. It simply says there's an electrical signal coming in, electrical signal going out. Packets go from one point to the other. That's it. And so every ISP connects to this and they say, okay, all my customer, I will take any traffic, say Reliance and Tata decide to peer with each other at that point. Reliance says all my traffic to Tata will go through here. Tata says the other thing. So now instead of having every ISP connected to each other at different locations, they are at one point. It saves everybody money. We have significant political issues with internet exchange points, at least in this country, which has led to some really stupid decisions in terms of political issues and in terms of technical issues at the end of it. Because that's what it boils down to. We could probably cut internet costs by like half by having say
having a deal with ISPs to load into customers?
Alright, so one of the things that you get for higher performance is that I will basically go and set up a data center and cache popular content at your location. It's a standard content delivery network type system where ISPs get the benefit of not having to go outside their network. The external bandwidth is borne by YouTube, but that's only gone once because they cache. So if 10 people ask me for a video, it's been only downloaded on the internet site once. Now an ISP cannot really keep caching everything. That's too big, that's too much data to cache. So YouTube will basically put in its own servers. It works out for them because the content gets to you faster. They are only sending one file down an international pipe. Your international pipes are a lot more expensive than your local pipes for every ISP, obviously, because they are paying for by the kilometer, by the bit, actually. And once you're done with that, so they end up saving money that way. Customers get better performance, and the ISP itself basically says, look, we have better YouTube service, so they can get more customers. So it's a win-win-win situation in theory for everyone. It depends more or less on how much pricing is and what sort of bandwidth pricing rates are being. Sometimes ISPs get greedy and sometimes they just say, oh, we are not going to carry your content. Period. Depends. I mean, ISPs have their own logic, which I have no idea about why it makes sense. So now that you have an idea of how IP addressing is basically distributed, then you have the more interesting problems of what happens about content. YouTube will be accelerated. What happens if the content being accelerated just happens to be illegal in that country? Something like Nazi denialism in Germany, some stuff like porn or VoIP software in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai, whatever. I mean, that's kind of risky for the ISP because the punishment there is there.
Even for the ISP.
Yes.
There's no safe harbor.
There's no safe harbor there. So essentially for a lot of people this thing becomes, this is the government controlled ISP. The internet is entirely a bunch of private networks except in countries like China and Saudi Arabia. Funnily enough, governmental internet happens to exist only in theocratic and dictatorial countries. When they have a private ISP, they are reasonably safe. Not so much in India now. There's a lot of blocking and stuff happening all the time. Yes, you have a question? No? Okay. I thought you had. Alright, so then you have, because of all these issues, you end up with stuff like cloud providers having problems.
Type is also
Type
is also
I think, yeah, I'm about to finish it. So you have stuff that says basically follow the law computing. So German data of any German user has to stay in Germany or in a country with equally strong privacy laws. So now the internet has, the people running the internet now have to figure out not only how to make sure that packets get through from one place to another, but how to make sure that these packets only stay here. They don't go out of these areas. There's quite a lot of engineering work involved there simply because someone said that, you know what, it's okay, personal data still belongs to the person who collects it. That happened in the US. So your personal information in the US is pretty much up for sale. If it's stored in Germany, you can't pretty much take it out of the country. That becomes a thing. Alright.
So if I run a web forum and users from Germany are registering it and
you don't have a problem unless you are sending that data to a third party. So running Google Analytics, the problem is Google Analytics on your forum is a crime.
Is Google taking care of that?
Only if Google will guarantee to you that the data will stay within Germany. If it goes to the US, you are the criminal because you are sending the data out.
If I'm in a different country, how does that work?
So theoretically what Germans can do is request for your extradition if they have an extradition treaty, or if you ever show up in Germany, they can arrest you. Or fine you.
We want to actually say that you are transferring and it's not going to change Germany to something.
So I guess in practical world, bigger corporations like Facebook will have an issue.
It ICE and Facebook recently, where the Facebook like icon, ICE basically said we are going to serve it only from our servers, and only people who click on it will get to the real icon. Because and Facebook basically got pissed off by that, saying that no, this is not how we are allowed to use it. And ICE says sorry, we cannot do this because that's a criminal offense.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's not even a civil offense. You can't just be fined, you go to jail.
I think one of the recent examples was the Egypt cutoff. Egypt was
Yeah.
from that. The government took a call that we don't want.
Yes.
And then they restored the connectivity.
That was simply the telephone
Yeah,
operator
exactly.
told to turn
Yeah.
all the lines off.
And then Google came to help again, saying that send your message to people.
Yeah, but that's a new at this point, and you. Nobody else has been asking questions.
Come on, go for it. We can't take it.
Yeah. So that was more or less the Google didn't come to their rescue really.
Yeah, exactly. Phone offerings and all.
Yeah, but I mean that's like fairly minor. If your lines are down,
You can't
there's no way
tell.
you're going to be able to connect. What ended up happening was that people basically dropped their radio sets,
Yeah.
and then people could talk to each other.
With the idea that the government can still do whatever they want.
I mean, they're the people with the
Yeah,
rights,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, authorities are there.
They can still do whatever they like.
Whenever you say that
Yeah.
you cannot take on the net, but yes.
The net has never been
Exactly.
completely wild west as things appear to be. It's just been mostly unenforced regulation because nobody knows what regulation to enforce where and how. Which is why email works so well and so cheaply, but it's also why we have spam. I mean, my time's up, I think so.